has been 2 days since you last moved. You are lying flat in the grass, in a country far from home. Your legs cramped up yesterday. You let them cramp. Insects crawl across your hands, across your neck, across your face. You do not swat them. A swat is movement, and movement is death. You are a sniper. And somewhere out there, someone is looking for you too. Then, through your scope, he appears, the man you were sent here for. This is the part nobody tells you about. Artillery kills from miles away. Pilots see targets, not people. But through a sniper's scope, war has a face. You watch him wipe the sweat from his neck. You watch him say something to the man beside him, and laugh. You get one shot. If you take it and hit, the mission is over. If you take it and miss, every rifle in that valley starts hunting the sound of yours. And either way, you will remember his face. Your finger rests against the trigger. 2 days of waiting for the next 2 seconds. If you were behind that rifle right now, could you take the shot? And what do you think it would cost you? Today, we meet 4 men who lived behind that scope. 3 stories from 3 different wars. 2 of these stories end with the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. One ends with something even rarer. Let's find out what one shot really costs. First story, 1918, France, the Argonne Forest. This story comes from a time before sniper schools existed, before the word sniper was even common. There was just a man, a rifle, and an eye that did not miss. And here is the first thing you need to know about him. Of the 4 men in this episode, the deadliest shot of his generation was the one who begged the army not to make him fight. Alvin York, born December 13, 1887, in a 2-room log cabin in Pall Mall, Tennessee. The third of 11 children. The York family didn't hunt for sport. They hunted to eat, and bullets cost money. If young Alvin fired twice at one turkey, that was a wasted bullet the family couldn't afford. Miss, and somebody goes hungry. That is how you learn to shoot. Not on a range, but at the dinner table. As a young man, York drank hard and fought harder. Then, in 1914, he walked into a small mountain church and changed his life completely. His new faith had one absolute rule. Violence was a sin, all of it, even in war. 3 years later, America entered World War I, and York was drafted. He wrote his answer right on the draft card. Don't want to fight. He asked to be excused as a conscientious objector, a man whose religion forbids killing. He was denied. His little mountain church wasn't on the government's list of recognized religions. So York reported for duty, carrying a Bible, and the question he couldn't answer: can a man love God and still fire a rifle at another man? His own officers sat with him, night after night, debating scripture. In the end, York decided that protecting the men beside him was also something God asked of him. He was assigned to Company G, 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Division. The Army had no idea what it had just put in uniform. October 8, 1918. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, the largest battle in American history, with over 1 million American soldiers in the fight. 17 men, York among them, were sent to slip behind German lines and silence the machine guns cutting their battalion apart. At first it worked. They surprised a German unit and began taking prisoners. Then the hillside above them erupted. German machine guns turned around and fired down into the group. In seconds, 6 Americans were dead and 3 were wounded. York was suddenly the senior man standing. What happened next sounds like fiction. It is documented fact. York stood in the open, half exposed, and began firing up at the machine gun nest. 1 shot, 1 gunner. Every time a German head rose above the gun, York fired, the way he'd fired at turkeys back home, where every bullet had to count. 6 German soldiers charged him with bayonets. His rifle couldn't stop them all in time, so he drew his pistol and dropped all 6, one by one, before any of them reached him. A German major, watching his men fall to what he assumed was an entire company, finally surrendered. He blew a whistle, and soldiers began standing up out of the brush with their hands raised. It was not a company. It was mostly one man from Tennessee. York and the 7 soldiers, still standing, marched their prisoners back toward American lines, collecting more surrendering Germans on the way. The final count: over 30 machine guns silenced, at least 25 enemy soldiers killed, 132 prisoners captured, 132, marched in by 8 Americans, led by a man who had begged the army not to make him fight. In April 1919, York received the Medal of Honor. France added its own highest honors, and the French commander Marshal Foch told him, "What you did was the greatest thing accomplished by any private soldier of all the armies of Europe." York came home the most famous soldier in America. Companies waved money at him. Advertisements, appearances, a Hollywood movie. For years, he turned nearly all of it down. He said his story wasn't for sale. Instead, he went back to the Tennessee mountains and spent his life building schools for children who, like him, had grown up with almost nothing. He died on September 2, 1964, and was buried in Pall Mall, a few miles from the cabin where he was born. Sergeant Alvin York. He never wanted to fire a shot, and he became a hero. Second story, 1966, Vietnam. A hill south of Da Nang, Carlos Norman Hathcock II, born May 20, 1942, in Little Rock, Arkansas. His childhood was poor and broken. His parents split, and he was raised mostly by his grandmother. His escape was the woods, a boy alone with an old rifle his father had brought back from World War II, pretending to be the one thing he wanted to become, a Marine. On May 20, 1959, his 17th birthday, Hathcock walked into a recruiting office and enlisted. He didn't wait a single day longer than the law required. The Marines quickly discovered what they had. In 1965, Hathcock won the Wimbledon Cup, the National 1,000-Yard Shooting Championship, the best long-range shooters in America, and the quiet kid from Arkansas beat them all. A year later, he was in Vietnam, and there, he added one detail to his uniform that told you everything about him. He tucked a small white feather into the band of his bush hat. Understand what that means. A sniper survives by being invisible. A white feather is a dot of bright white in a green jungle, a target pinned to his own head. It was a message to the enemy. I know you're looking for me. Here I am. The North Vietnamese took the message personally. They gave him a name, White Feather, and put a bounty on his head worth years of a soldier's pay. Enemy snipers were sent out specifically to hunt him. His official record, 93 confirmed kills. Remember what confirmed means. An officer had to witness it. Hathcock's own estimate of the real number was over 300. 2 missions explain the legend. The first, a North Vietnamese general deep inside enemy territory. Hathcock volunteered. Getting a shot meant crossing 1,500 yards of open field, flat, exposed grassland, patrolled by armed soldiers. He crossed it in 4 days and 3 nights, not walking, not crawling on hands and knees, sliding inches at a time, pushing himself forward with his fingertips, in an army of ants and heat, without sleep. Enemy patrols walked within feet of him. They were looking for a man. Nobody looks down for a shadow, moving slower than the grass grows. On the 4th day, the general stepped out of his quarters. 1 shot, from 700 yards. Then the shadow turned around and inched its way back out. They never found him. The second story has been debated for 50 years because it sounds impossible. Hathcock told it himself, and the geometry is on his side. The second mission found him. An enemy sniper, a skilled one, was sent to kill White Feather and was picking off Marines to bait him out. Hathcock and his partner went hunting. Somewhere in that jungle, two invisible men spent hours searching for each other, each knowing that being seen first meant dying first. Then Hathcock caught it, a flash of light in the brush, sunlight glancing off a lens. He fired at the flash. When they reached the body, they understood what had happened. Hathcock's bullet had gone clean through the enemy's rifle scope and into his eye. Think about the geometry of that. A scope is a narrow tube. For a bullet to pass straight through it, the two rifles had to be aimed exactly at each other at the same instant. Both snipers had found their target. Hathcock fired first, by a heartbeat, but the moment that tells you who Carlos Hathcock really was has nothing to do with a rifle. September 16, 1969. Hathcock was riding on top of an armored vehicle. Picture a steel box on tank tracks, carrying Marines, when it rolled over an enemy mine. The explosion turned the vehicle into a fireball. Hathcock was thrown clear, his clothes on fire. He could have rolled to safety. Instead, he climbed back onto the burning vehicle. Again and again, into the flames, pulling Marines out. He didn't stop until all 7 were off. He walked away with burns across more than 40% of his body. His hands, his back, his arms, scarred so badly he would never snipe again. The deadliest marksman in Marine Corps history ended his war not by taking a life, but by saving 7, while he himself was on fire. The years after were cruel in a quieter way. In 1975, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that slowly strips away the body's control, balance, strength, the steady hands that had defined his life. In 1979, the Marine Corps medically retired him, just 55 days short of his 20 years. It broke his heart, but he refused to disappear. From a wheelchair, he spent the rest of his life teaching, training police and military snipers, passing on everything he knew. He said once, "I like shooting, and I love hunting, but I never did enjoy killing anybody." In 1996, nearly 30 years after that burning vehicle, the Marine Corps finally awarded him the Silver Star for the 7 men he pulled from the fire. Carlos Hathcock died on February 26, 1999. He was 56. Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock. He waited alone in the grass so other Marines could go home, and he became a hero. Third story, 1993. Somalia. This time, 2 men, because snipers almost never work alone. They work in pairs, shooter and spotter. 2 men who train together until they think with one mind. Gary Ivan Gordon. Born August 30, 1960, in Lincoln, Maine, a small paper mill town where everybody knew everybody. Randall David Shughart. Born August 13, 1958. He grew up working on a dairy farm near Newville, Pennsylvania. 2 small-town kids, a mill town and a farm. Both found their way into Delta Force, the Army's most secretive and most selective unit. Out of every 100 elite soldiers who attempt Delta selection, only a handful make it through. Gordon and Shughart were sniper team leaders even there. The best chosen from the best. October 3, 1993. Task Force Ranger launches a raid into Mogadishu to capture lieutenants of the warlord tearing Somalia apart. The plan: fly in, grab them, fly out. About an hour, then a Black Hawk helicopter, call-sign Super 61, was shot down over the city. And as the battle spiraled, a rocket-propelled grenade struck a second Black Hawk, call-sign Super 64, flown by Chief Warrant Officer Mike Durant. It crashed nearly a mile from the first crash site, alone. Gordon and Shughart were circling above it in a third helicopter, Super 62, providing sniper cover through open doors. From the air, they could see everything. Durant and his crew, badly wounded, trapped in the wreckage. And from every street and alley, armed crowds converging on the crash site. Every rescue force was already committed to the first crash. Nobody could reach Super 64. Nobody except 2 snipers in a helicopter. They radioed a request, put us on the ground. Denied. 2 men against hundreds in the middle of a hostile city. Command called it suicide. They were told they could do more good shooting from the air. They looked down at 4 wounded Americans about to be overrun and asked again, denied again. Do the math they were doing. 2 rifles, the ammunition on their backs. No rescue coming, because they were the rescue. They knew exactly how this would end. Everyone on that radio knew. They asked a 3rd time, and this time command said yes. Super 62 came in low over the rooftops, and the 2 men slid down ropes into a maze of shacks and alleys, about 100 meters from the wreck. Minutes later, the helicopter that had dropped them took a rocket-propelled grenade and limped back to base, trailing smoke. Now there was no air cover, no ground force, no way out. Whatever happened next, Gordon and Shughart were on their own. 100 meters under fire the entire way. Militia rifles cracking from windows, from alleys, from behind cars. They fought through it and reached the wreck of Super 64. Inside, they found what was left. Durant's back and leg were broken. He couldn't move. Around him, his crew lay dead or dying. They lifted Durant clear of the wreckage and moved him to cover. Then the 2 of them turned the broken helicopter into a fortress and placed themselves between 1 wounded pilot and the city full of guns, a perimeter of 2. They fought with a sniper's discipline. Every shot counted. But the ammunition ran lower, and the crowds did not stop coming. Then Gordon was hit and killed. Shughart went back to Durant. He picked up Gordon's rifle, his Car 15, pressed it into the wounded pilot's hands along with the last magazine, and said just 2 words, "Good luck." Then he walked back around the nose of the aircraft, alone now, and kept fighting. 10 more minutes, until the ammunition was gone, until he too was killed. The perimeter fell. The crowd swarmed the crash site, beat the pilot they found still breathing, and dragged him away. A militia commander spared his life. A captured American pilot was worth more alive than dead. Mike Durant spent 11 days as a prisoner. Then he was released. He came home to his family because of them. He said, "Without a doubt, I owe my life to these 2 men and their bravery." On May 23, 1994, President Bill Clinton presented the Medal of Honor to their widows at the White House. They were the first Americans to receive it since the Vietnam War. Today, a U.S. Army base, Fort Gordon in Georgia, carries Gary Gordon's name. And the Navy ship, the USNS Shughart, carries Randy's to sea, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon, Sergeant First Class Randy Shughart. They asked 3 times to join a fight they could not win, and they became heroes. 4 men, Alvin York, Carlos Hathcock, Gary Gordon, Randy Shughart. 3 wars, separated by 75 years. But look closely, and something doesn't fit. We call them snipers, masters of the rifle. Yet the moments that made them who they were had almost nothing to do with shooting. York's defining battle was the one inside him. A man who hated killing, deciding he could still stand between death and the men beside him. Hathcock's finest hour was climbing onto a burning vehicle with his bare hands. Gordon and Shughart's last mission began the moment they set the long rifles down and stepped into a crowd. The rifle was never the point. The discipline was. Years of patience, of doing hard things slowly and well when nobody was watching. That's what those years built. People who were ready. Because real patience isn't waiting for something to happen. It's being ready when it does. Most of us will never lie motionless in a jungle for 3 days. But every one of us knows the long wait, the years of work nobody sees, the training, the studying, the showing up. When nothing seems to move and nobody claps. And every one of us gets a version of that one shot, the moment that will not come twice. The job, the person, the chance to speak up, to step in, to go back for someone. It arrives without warning, and it only asks one question. Are you ready right now? These 4 men spent years preparing for a moment they hoped would never come. When it came, not one of them hesitated. Let's remember what each of them did. Alvin York didn't want to fight at all, and when his friends were dying, he silenced more than 30 machine guns and marched 132 prisoners out of the Argonne Forest. Carlos Hathcock waited days in the grass for single shots that saved Marine lives and ended his war on top of a burning vehicle, pulling 7 men from the fire. Gordon and Randy Shughart asked 3 times to be dropped into a fight they knew they couldn't win, and the pilot came home to his family because they were 4 men, 3 wars, 1 long wait, and 1 moment that counted. So, back to that rifle in the grass. 2 days of stillness. 1 shot. 1 face you'll never forget. If your moment came right now, the one that won't come twice, would you be ready? This concludes this episode. Thank you for watching Forgotten Valor. Next, we'll meet men who walked onto the battlefield carrying no weapon at all, not to fight, but to stand beside the dying where the fire was heaviest. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to support us. Thank you.